Welcome everybody to the Catholic Homeschool community, another fireside chat that I am very honored to get to host this time. And we're going to be talking all things virtue and character education. My guest today is Monica Speach. And I just wanted to say, number one, the technology today has afforded me the ability to finally see Monica face to face, because Monica and I both have worked together, known each other, I guess maybe 20 years. Really, we have used her program in my own homeschool. So I'm really eager to share the beauty, the wonder of what Monica's passion and heart has been. So Monica, I think what I'm going to do is start by reading this bio that you gave me. And we'll start right there, okay?
Great.
Monica Speach, who is the author of PACE, and PACE, just for anybody know, is the Program for Achieving Character Education, but everybody knows it as PACE, is an education specialist with degrees in Romance, languages, and education. In addition to homeschooling her children for 11 years, she's taught English as a second language and Spanish to students from kindergarten through college. In more recent years, her publishing and educational work has centered on issues of civic responsibility, volunteerism, and character education. The PACE curriculum is a direct result of her research and ongoing interest in these growing and ever more important fields. And I wanted to share with the audience this beautiful quote, which is a direct quote from Monica. She says, as Aristotle wrote, "Good habits formed at youth make all the difference. I cannot think of a more vital task for parents and teachers than to start children off on the right foot by giving them a strong moral foundation. This is the purpose of the PACE program." So welcome, Monica. Thank you for joining us. Great. Good to have you.
Thank you, everybody.
So let's start right there. I really, I know that this is and ever more present, in today's culture, the importance of character and virtue education, and is there like a difference between character and virtue education? Can we kind of get a big picture of like, why is it important? And just start at the beginning with all of us. What do we mean by character education?
Right. Character education is just very basically teaching children moral behavior. It's giving them the foundational values, the core values, whatever you want to call them, the virtues, so that they can be good citizens, so they can be good moral people. And it's like giving them a moral compass, which is, the name of one of the books that we use in our program. Everyone needs guidelines. Everyone needs, when you start when they're little and you start showing them the right way, the moral way, they're going to form habits. And then it just becomes second nature. And that's what we want. We want, and people say, how can you teach it? Well, that's a really good question, because you're not teaching facts. This isn't math. This isn't teaching Spanish. It's concepts, and concepts take a long time to grow until they become habits. And that's exactly why it's so incredibly important to start when your children are young, because if you can start when they're young, then it just grows and grows and grows. And by the time they're making the really, really big decisions that they need to make, it's already been instilled in them. They know. And we want them to be good citizens, and people don't use that expression anymore. People don't say citizens, we don't say citizenship and talk about that, but that's really what it is, right? I mean, even within your own family, it's a community, it's a caring community, and it just branches out until you are a good citizen. So that's basically what it is. And it does encompass the virtues.
Yeah, so it's like something that's even just related. I can see that, like when we talk about our siblings rivalry, siblings fighting with each other, that's one of those common questions we get in the homeschool community. They're fighting all the time, or they're not obeying a parent, or they're talking back, so we can see that in the proximate. But I think what you're drawing upon is saying by doing it in this small environment, we're bringing it out into the world.
Right.
So yeah, so let's talk about out into the world. Why is this so important, especially now? And is this something that you mentioned? People don't say citizen. Is it just that we're not talking about character and virtues? We're not teaching it.
We're not talking about it anymore because I think, well, like especially in the schools and in our culture, people don't want to impose their value system, as they put it. Whereas years ago, there was a common core value system, right? I mean, when you were growing up, it's a cliche, but if you did something, you were playing out in your backyard and you did something wrong, another parent was like, excuse me, come here, and they would correct you because everyone had a very common idea of what was right from what was wrong. Now, teachers, they're petrified. They don't want to go near the idea of character. I approached a public school years ago and I said, I'd like, I have this program. And I said, it's called, it uses the book of virtues. And the principal said, virtues? No, we can't say that word. And I'm like, what? No, we have to say character concepts. And I was like, oh my goodness, like you're afraid, it's like a fear. So
Right.
they don't want to touch the subject because they think, well, I might be saying something that, the parents might disagree with, or I might be bringing too much of my faith-based ideas into this. So that's the beauty of homeschooling, is we have total autonomy. We don't have to go to a principal and say, can we teach this? You don't have to go through that. You can just, it's a relaxed atmosphere and it permeates the entire day if done properly, which, we can talk about later. And when I started this back in the late 90s, things were a little dicey. And now it's like, oh my goodness, I cannot imagine what it's like raising children right now, little children, because how do you keep them from being bombarded by all the things that are happening? And it's everywhere. I mean, I know you know what I'm talking about.
Yes. And especially since, and it's interesting, I remember going to a Catholic homeschooling conference when they were in person long ago.
Right.
And there was a priest who talked about at the time when the book of virtues, and again, we'll talk about that, Bill Bennett's book came out. And he said, people like to talk more about values. And he's like, the book of values is like the Sears catalog, which again, Sears doesn't exist anymore. But the point is, values have a very different, totally different understanding than virtues. So Monica, let's talk about a little bit. So our Catholic understanding about virtues. So that is distinctly, different. Is it different? And how do we bring our Catholicism, our understanding of the virtues, and how we are called to holiness, how the Holy Spirit helps infuse that into our lives?
Well, it's interesting. So I just put a blog post up last night on my website, and it's called, I think it's called Practicing Virtues Through Lent. And so I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and it you can tie each of the virtues into what we are called to do during Lent, which is our Catholic faith, so our practicing our Catholic faith. So you think about almsgiving, that's compassion, right? Fasting, that's self-discipline. Honesty, that's having pure conversations with God and not being afraid to speak with him with total honesty, going to confession more. Again, compassion, studying, meditating on the passion of Christ. So we already have it built.
How about perseverance? Just get through Lent.
I know. I always think, I remember when I was a kid, 40 days. Now I'm like, oh my gosh, 40 days is really fast.
Exactly.
But yeah, so I mean, we already have so much to begin with as Catholics. We get it, we understand it, and we want it for our children. So being a Catholic is all part of imitating Christ, and that's what being a virtuous person is.
Yes.
So I tell people that, it's just part of who we are, but we are now in these days really being, the culture is being overtaken by people who don't share our values and aren't that interested in virtue.
Right. Or it's a slippery, that slippery slope saying it's all relative. There's
Right.
no central truth. And therefore, your truth is fine for you and for me, but we
Mm,
know that truth is in the person of Jesus Christ. So one of the things you touched upon is I'd like to explore a little bit more is that, okay, so now we have our family, we can practice them, we can learn the virtues, but it's like one thing to just have this laundry list of virtues. I think the beauty of what you're talking about, and we're going to break this down for families, is the idea of you in your program going through literature, the Bible, the saints. Why use that as teaching methods? And how does
right.
that work? Yeah.
Right. To make it multisensory, because that's how kids learn best, basically. People ask, I'm a complete literature fanatic, but I come by it honestly. My dad was a reading specialist. Then he worked for McGraw-Hill. I grew up literally with books surrounding me. My sisters are both English majors. My son was, we're really book people. And so literature was always going to be a big, I mean, the way, and I guess we'll talk about it eventually about how I developed PACE, but it had a lot to do with my love of literature because it's relatable. That's how people learn. And I know that you can talk to your kids, and you should talk to your kids about being good people and behaving and all the virtuous things. But when they read it and then they discuss it, story really, really, really penetrates who we are. We love it. And kids, I mean, what do kids love when they're little? They love to be read stories.
Right.
And they love to see how other people, because they're always imitating and they're always watching. What does that person do? Oh, that person got in trouble. I don't want to get in trouble. I'm not going to do what that person did. It's all imitative. So I basically, and I have a teaching background. So, I mean, I am a teacher by trade. So of course I was going to integrate as many possible things as I could. And I taught English as a second language, which is a little bit of being a grammarian, an actress, and a literature teacher all put in one, because you have to do so much
Immersive.
visual. And yeah, there's a lot of action going on in an ESL classroom. And then also I taught Spanish, and a lot of times to students who didn't really want to learn Spanish. So there's a lot, so you have to draw on a lot of different areas of yourself. So that's why there's so many parts of it. But also we know that it's very important to read, and it's very important to define what we're talking about. But it's also extremely important to discuss it. And that's why discussion is such, and in fact, in the intro of the manual, I always write, please do not ignore this part. It's very important. Yes. After you've been talking about the virtue for a month or however long, and you've been reading these stories, and talk, because when you hear what the kids are saying, that's when you really find out, do they really understand this?
So it's almost like a jumping off point too, almost as prompts, because as you said, it's really difficult to just say, okay, you can see that the kids, let's say, are fighting with each other, or somebody wasn't being honest about something. And it's just saying, instead of just drilling, you should be an honest person. You have the glorious opportunity through these stories to then talk about, but then you can, instead of pointing fingers and all, although actions have consequences, it is important to kind of just jump off with questions. Well, what did you learn from that story? So yeah, let's talk about kind of how does it work? Let's get now into some of those specifics, because it is important, that it works, that this is a method. How, like, I know that you mentioned there's like 2 approaches you can take to it, basically. So
there's several. I tried to make it as flexible as possible, because when I homeschooled, I did different things all the time. I was always trying to do different things. So I didn't buy a set curriculum, which was a lot more work, in all honesty, but I enjoyed that. But I do like to be flexible, because my husband was in the military, and we traveled a lot with the kids. And so we had to be flexible. So that was just something I really wanted to do. I think the easiest way to do it is there are 10 virtues, basically 10 months of the school year, if you go September through June. And you tackle one virtue a month. I give a suggestion of which ones to go first, because I think the very foundation is self-discipline. I think, start the school year with self-discipline.
Yes.
You're off to a good start. And then And then so little by, so each virtue is defined to begin with. We have quotes, I think about 10 or 12 quotes that help exemplify what the virtue is. Then we start with the stories from, so I have my book of virtues right here.
Great.
Home. And I always mean to tell people that, sometimes they're like, oh my gosh, that's a big book, I saw it and I, it's kind of expensive. And these books are so popular now that you can get them for like $5 at a used bookstore. In fact, every time I go to a used bookstore,
yes,
if I see them, I buy them because I give them to people. I'm constantly handing them out because they're just phenomenal books. I mean,
right,
just,
right. You are right. I've seen them used. I've passed them on to my married children.
yes.
What about, there's also other versions of that book, not to get too distracted, but I know there's like the American history ones. Is there any particular one that's a favorite of yours?
Yeah, well, but you need to use the one, this one, because that is the page numbers that correspond to the manual and the workbook. So there's a children's book of virtues, which is a lot smaller and thinner. And, if you want to just use that to read to your kids, absolutely. But to use my curriculum, you do need that. And then the other book is, these are heavy, the Moral Compass.
Yes.
Which is, they're a little more advanced. Usually you're reading those more in the upper grades. So I
Are the
recommend,
kids reading them themselves, or is this something you're reading aloud?
in the early grades, we're reading aloud. And we always read them aloud, almost always. I mean, it was just easier, and I just loved to read aloud. I still read aloud. I still force my family to listen to me.
No, that's so true, Monica. I think people, once they stop reading aloud, once their kids can read to themselves, and I'm like, oh my goodness, no, there's so much benefits. That could be another talk we do, fireside chat. But read aloud never really should stop ever, even as young adults or adults.
Right.
So,
I mean,
so you mentioned ages. What ages is this really designed for?
All right. So PACE is designed for kindergarten through 6th grade.
Okay.
And so what I do in the manual is I go through the manual. So I recommend, let me see if I can. So for example, is this going to show up backwards, or is it going to be?
No, it's showing up fine. Okay.
So like for kindergarten, I recommend in the book of virtues, I have 2 stories. So you would start, reading the first one. And again, there are also workbooks that go along with it. So if you have the workbooks, then it's all very organized for you, 4 weeks, 5 days a week. If you don't have the workbooks, then you just choose, so ahead of time, the parent just looks down and says, okay, on Monday, we're going to read a couple of the quotes. Some people like to print them out.
Yeah, we used to put them on index cards, and they would be mounted in our schoolroom, which was our dining room. So they became the quotes for the week. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, I love hearing what people do.
Or I would make it handwriting practice for the week as well.
Great idea too. Some people will print them out on their computers and then have the kids will color them in. People have them memorize them. I'm a real quote person. I don't know why, but when I was about 12 or 14 or something, I started collecting quotes. I had like my dad had like an old journal, and I just started, every time I'd read something, oh, that's great. So when and I like to tell people that I really want to impress now. This is very impressive. I wrote the original edition of PACE without benefit of the internet.
Yay! Amazing.
So you can take that any way you want. I'm old, A, and also B. It was just, I I remember a couple of years ago, my daughter turned, she's like, I just realized something. You did all this research at the library. Is that why you went to the library constantly? I was like, that was one of the reasons.
Correct.
Now I'm off the track.
But getting back to, so basically you have the 10 virtues. With each virtue, you start out with quotes. Okay. And so these are quotes that are meant to inspire and can be used in
inspire and help to reinforce. Because the whole idea of teaching character education, and what I tell people all the time is, you're not teaching facts, you're teaching concepts.
Yes, exactly.
And it has to be reinforced so that that will eventually become a habit. The only way to reinforce it is it's just constant. It's just over and over again. And again, this is why it works so beautifully in a homeschool environment, because as you know, I'm sure in your family you did the same thing. You know, my husband worked, I stayed home with the kids. Whatever we were studying, that was a discussion at dinner, in the car going to soccer practice, on a vacation.
Right.
And I would be, and it was great because the kids, you know, they didn't know I was manipulating them in this way, whereas like the grandparents came and I'd be like, oh, why don't you tell, you know, Nona about the story we read this morning? And
Right.
then, you know, do you have, you know, what did that teach us? And then, you know, Nona, do you have a story about that? And it was just, it's so natural. It's just so,
Right.
it works beautifully. And then dad comes home and you start talking and he'll say, well, you know, something happened at work. Or this reminds me of when I was in high school and I was playing football or whatever. And so it's just so, it's so organic. It's just really natural.
Yeah.
And so the quotes kind of start you off, and we define it. I give adjectives, I give synonyms and antonyms. I also repeat this quite a lot. It's just as important to tell them what a virtue is and what isn't.
Yes, yes. I was going to say, we always did that too. And that seemed to really get the kids' interest. Oh, that's not what it is. And that really, really seemed to make it more concrete for
Right.
kids to understand.
Right. And then I also have, you know, like the adjectives and stuff. So then you start with reading the stories, and I have the Book of Virtues and the Moral Compass. And the stories are, I mean,
Are there classic stories? So if people aren't familiar with the Book of Virtues, okay,
Right.
these are all classical stories, correct?
right. And it's just all arranged for us in this beautiful tome. You know, it's just all there. It's poetry, it's speeches, it's about athletes, it's about historic people, it's fairy tales, it's Aesop, all these different things that, frankly, I don't know where our kids would ever read this.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Unless, I mean, I know some curricula, some homeschool curricula they do touch on that. My friends who had kids in the public schools,
Right. So they weren't being exposed. And I think that was the core of Bill Bennett's, you know, purpose of doing this, was to bring all of that to the forefront once again.
Right.
The great stories.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
the
that
stories,
inspire.
you really can't improve upon them. And
So now
and
you
again,
also, Monica, bring in the Bible and saints. So I know that you had a Christian version, but the Catholic version is, and so how are those brought into
so the
each
Catholic
virtue?
version has Mary and the saints. So there's just a meditation
Oh.
on Mary. And then again, I loved it, and the kids love this because it's so, for example, in the very first the first virtue we study is self-discipline. So I have a list of saints who are disciplined, and then I have a list of saints who struggle with self-discipline. And the kids love that. They love the idea that, hey, wait, this person became a saint.
Right.
But they had problems.
Struggled.
They had problems with this. And I kind of try to, you know, because I don't want to badmouth any of the saints. So I try to say, okay, Saint Peregrine, he had a little issue with anger. Saint Francis de Sales had a bad temper. Saint Teresa of Avila was distracted in prayer. Saint Augustine, self-indulgence. Yes. Absent-mindedness, laziness. So, and then I have a quote from one of the saints, and many times just something maybe I like to see a little bit of memorization. You know, if parents are open to that, I've always been a big fan of that. Then comes the part that I had the most fun researching, which is the booklet.
Yes, the books.
It just gave me an excuse to go to the library and take out piles of children's books and read them, which, like, how fun is that? You know,
yes. So you kind of done the work for us instead of gleaning through piles of stuff. You really actually picked the gems.
Yeah, and I really love that's just,
they are by age, and so one of the things I can think about this too, before we get into the rest, because I know there's the other action parts of it. How does somebody really fit that into their day? Okay, you know what I'm saying? And it seems like it's, oh gosh, that's just one more thing I have to layer into my curriculum. What is your suggestion? You know, because this is so central, so important, and as you said, so natural and organic. What do you recommend?
Yeah, so what I and I say this in my introduction, it's quite a long introduction. Sometimes I think, oh, they're going to just look at this and say, oh no. But I try to give, I'm a very thorough person. So I go a little overboard. I know that. I mean, this is a lot of material, so you can tell that I am. There is, organization does help, even though so much of this is done for you, especially with the workbooks. But I would suggest before the month starts that you're going to tackle whatever virtue it is that you're going to start studying. You look ahead and you put some books on hold or go to the library and take them out that you know that you want your children to read or that are recommended in the workbooks. And then, I mean, that's real. If you're going to have the books, you're going to have the Book of Virtues and the Moral Compass anyway.
Yeah.
You have a Bible in your house. I'm pretty sure everyone
Yes.
has a Bible in their
Yes.
house.
Yes.
The saints, I kind of rely on either people. A lot of people have saint books, you know, the whole collection of the saints. There's so many saints listed. I'm sure you can find several, or you can use Loyola Press and some of them online.
Yes.
So really, I mean, yes, you use your computer. What you have to organize the best is definitely the book selection, because you have to have, you know, I'm not suggesting that people buy these books at all, just definitely
Right.
have a library. And that's really, I would say that's the part that probably takes the most time for the parents. Aside from that, like I said, everything, I did all the research and the legwork.
So if you're doing this once a month, this is your theme for the month, you really literally have like a planning time once a month.
Right.
And, you know, Monica, when I did it with my children, because of whatever curriculum or the dynamics, you know, sometimes I have 7 children, my big heyday was when I was doing all 7, kindergarten to 12th grade. There's just so many hours in the day. I actually took your program and did 3 of them, 3 virtues, but took 3 months for each. And it allowed us the time to really, really, really spend time, not make me feel like, oh gosh, we're never, ever going to get to this. But it was a way, and who didn't love stories? Who didn't love the handwriting or the quote? And we could use more of self-discipline or more of honesty or whatever we were working on. And then we would rotate it through, because I do see from one of the questions, somebody's point, they're like, well, how does this work if you have multi-ages? And that is, you know, again, for us, it was a family thing. And even though it's K-6, the older ones, even when they take charge where they're reading aloud the story, Monica, you know, they're passing that on to the younger kids, but let them be in charge of story time, you know, once or twice a week. And we would rotate through 3 virtues one year, 3 the next, 3 the next, and then just rotate it back again. So we were covering them, and all the children ended up covering all of them in like a 4-year period. So.
Right. That's wonderful. I'm so interested in hearing how different people do it, because that's exactly why I wanted it to be flexible. There's no right or wrong to using PACE, but it's, you know, you buy one manual. It's for all the kids. You only have to buy it once. They can all use it. Like you said, I mean, some of the 6th grade books could be used for older kids.
Yes.
Some of the stories and the moral compass are a little more challenging, and the older kids could read that too. But the point is that the whole family is focusing on the same thing at the same time.
Exactly.
And that's really the most important part.
So let's talk about the discussion, because that is something that you mentioned, you know, how that, and then again, I love that, because you can't always assume that as a parent, you actually even know like where to begin to ask questions. And so I love how you're helping mom out. How did that come about, the discussions?
Well, it just came about because when I was writing it, I noticed that my kids were asking questions about the stories, but then they started asking more generalized questions. And judging from the questions they were asking, I realized that they either weren't getting it, or they had more questions. And I started writing them down, because I was like, oh, this is good. Again, I wrote this program for my kids. It was a project for me. I had no intention of doing anything else with it. I don't know why, because I was putting so much time into it.
But it's a work of love for your own children. And that's why
I mean, it was a research thing. I don't know if you want to talk about this now, or if you want to just talk about the discussion.
Yeah, go ahead, jump in.
Well, what happened was I was homeschooling. I was new to homeschooling. It was like the mid-90s, and the Book of Virtues came out. And my father said to me, you got to buy this book. I just read about it in the New York Times. You got to buy it. So as soon as it came out, I bought it, and I started reading it to the kids. We want another one. We want another one. They loved it. So then I was looking at it one night, and I was like, well, you know, 10 virtues, 10 months, maybe I should focus on 1 virtue a month. And then, well, you know, I just thought about a book that has a lot to do with honesty or whatever. So then I started saying, you know, next time you go to the library, I'm going to get that book, or, you know, a couple of books. Then I started bringing in the quotes, and then I was like, well, the Bible is a perfect example of all the virtues. So
Right.
with Bible stories, so then I bring them in. So it was really just a collection of all, like basically my favorite things, just putting them all together. And then as a
Right.
teacher, I wanted to make a lesson plan from this. I mean, that's what I was doing. So then I started saying, we need to have some discussion, like not set discussion periods. At that point, it wasn't even that set, but I knew that there was going to be a discussion component. But I'm a big stickler for writing. I do not consider myself a particularly good writer. I always use the excuse that I studied so many languages in college, I wasn't able to perfect English. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking with it. So I mean, I'm a solid writer, but I'm not like a particularly creative or inventive one. And I really wanted my kids to be good writers, and I focused so much on writing. So I knew there was going to be a writing section because
Yes, so we didn't talk about that. So
Right.
what is the writing?
after the books, and then the writing section, there's quite a few. I mean, about 25 suggestions. And for the younger kids, it's a lot like drawing. Draw a picture of a dirty room, draw a picture of a clean room, something like that. I try to make them not, a lot of thought-provoking. Not just write the plot of this story. Every once in a while I will do that, but like compare and contrast, because that's a good exercise.
Yes.
But I really like, for example, rewrite the story of, the goose that laid the golden egg, and
Yeah.
I write it in their own words. A lot of times I have comment on this, because it's starting to get them. They have to think. It's not just looking at something and then copying. They have to actually think, like, what are the most important parts when they're, so teaching them how to summarize, teaching them how to contrast and compare, teaching them how to comment, make charts, things like that. So it's all different types of writing expression. So that is obviously important. And then I didn't add the.
Did you find some kids, and so that's kind of I love that, Monica. Some kids absorb things in different modalities. So being able to make concrete what you're hearing, I imagine, is hitting the brain very differently than and internalizing this. Is that some of what's going on behind the writing?
My kids are different learners. They have different ways of approaching learning. And then again, with my background, teaching people from all the different continents, and the way that education is done in Africa as opposed to in South America, as opposed to Europe and Asia, very, very different. So I was always having to kind of, okay, they're not getting it this way. Now I got to do it this way. They're not getting it on the blackboard. So now I've got to present it in a different way. So that was a real advantage to me. Well,
that's the beauty of having, and one of the things I want to really strongly emphasize to people is that you don't have to do every single thing that's in here. And I think that's the point of your being thorough, is because you have this wealth of experience to say that we can approach our children with the most important things, which are these: to become a virtuous person, our call to holiness, but do it in many different ways, and ways that best match our children. So, yeah.
And if people are going to be using this from year to year, I wanted to have so much in there that they would always be able to find something new every year. Not that there's anything wrong with going back and repeating. I mean, the stories, oh my gosh, you can read them over and over again. But I wanted always to be something new and something different. I didn't really add the enrichment activities until a little bit later.
Yes.
And then that was just a ton of fun, because I love.
So what are the enrichment? Go ahead and tell people about that.
The music. So one of the things that I noticed was that kind of came about. A friend of mine, who's godmother to one of my kids, gave my son this book. I can't remember the name. It's a music book, very kind of a simple piano book. And it was like the traditional folk songs kind of things, Pop Goes the Weasel and Oh Susanna and those kinds of. And I thought, I always use my kids' friends as guinea pigs. I'd say, they come over to play. Like, so do you know anything about Michelangelo? Do you know anything?
Right.
Are you familiar with this song? And they look at me like, what? And I thought, we don't want to lose that. We don't want to lose this great, the mulberry bush and all these different songs. These are important. Important for for our children to learn them or relearn them or whatever. So I wanted to make sure that we had those types of kind of Americana things in there. And then also like some I like classical music. Everybody in my family plays the piano and stuff. And then I have a song, singing is always fun. Of course, it's a fun
So the
activity.
classical music, you can just go on your Spotify or YouTube and you can find that. And so that could be playing while you're having lunch and you're learning.
And then, what does that have to do with the virtue? Well, let's, for example, I'm looking again at Giuseppe Verdi, who is a composer, an opera, the discipline that it took him. Well, he had a fascinating life if you look into his life.
Yes,
But,
yes.
So of course it takes a lot of discipline to write music and to, train. He had to train all those girls at the school.
Correct. Teaching them the
right.
strings.
So if you study his life, and then singing is always fun, and then art. So I give like 4 paintings to look, because I love that idea. I used to love, well, my daughter's very artistic, so I'd be fascinated to see what she would see in a particular painting as opposed to what my son would see. And they would bring different things to it. And then it's really, really neat because they get older and they'll be like, hey, I was in this museum in Vienna, and guess what I saw? Get what painting I saw. It was one of the, and that's like so neat because,
so it's laying that foundation of that ability to recognize, but then to see the messages behind that. Well, Monica, one of the other areas, again, with character and virtue is music and art. And again, when we talk about it, it's approaching the author of beauty and how we touch ourselves. So it kind of stands to reason. I think that you're putting in art, music, and approaching, the virtues from that aspect as well. And so people could actually make that, I always love to say, count as school. It definitely can count as school. You're doing this.
Can this count as school, Mom? Can this count as school? I remember that. Yeah. Yes. That's true. I've forgotten that. That's so
why
funny.
do we always feel like that's cheating? And I'm saying, like, no, that's central. That's absolutely central.
They're called teachable, moments.
Teachable moments.
So that you're, So then there's a nature section, which is just, building, a birdhouse or for perseverance or something like that. And then just general activities. I happen to like movies. So I put a movie in that the whole family can watch together.
Oh, nice.
And then I end with this section with a memorization, so like some verses from the Bible or a short poem. And then how to practice the virtue, the practical part.
Yes, so, I love this. This is great. And this is how we can bring in the older kids as well. And again, I always love having tag teaming, older sibling with younger sibling.
A lot more kids than I do. So that was must have been a big part for you, and that is great. I mean, that's exactly what I want. Is I want everyone working together as a family doing this. Like I said, if you live in a family where like the more traditional, where the father comes home at the end of the day and is sitting at my family, it's traditional, except that my husband would come home and also cook. Very, very lucky. So he'd be cooking and we'd be in the kitchen talking to him, sitting down at dinner and discussing these things. But yeah, it's it kind of defeats the purpose of teaching the virtues if you don't say, and now this is how you do it practically in your life.
Yeah, and that brings full circle back to your whole idea of being a good citizen, okay? Because what we're now saying, we're going to bring this out into the world, and it's for the good of the world, the good of my family first and foremost, but the good of the world. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Because we want to give back, and that's
well, I know one of the things you talk about in here is these expected outcomes. So we've discussed how important it is, so vital with character, and virtues, how we can actually practice this. We can make this natural in our family. What can we expect as a family if we actually, go ahead and embark on character and virtue education?
Well, I think we can expect, I mean, there's a very basic correlation between good character and academic success. And that's been proven, that secular and, religion, whatever way you want to put it, that's been proven time and time again. That's actually one of the reasons so many schools started doing character education in the classrooms. They're like, we need to get these kids controlled. We need them to learn how to be more compassionate to each other and to be honest and not cheat, and friendship and all that. Because there's a direct correlation. So yes, you're going to have children who are going to be, by the time, if you use the PACE curriculum from kindergarten through 6 or however many years, your kids will have been exposed to unbelievable amounts of literature. And it's called classic for a reason. We have this beautiful wealth of information, these beautiful works of literature,
Right.
and they wouldn't necessarily be exposed to them. So they're obviously have that. They're going to have a lot more. I think what we really want for our kids is when they are on their own,
Right.
and they're with their peers and they're faced with a decision, they're going to make the right decision.
Right.
Because they've had all of these examples. We were talking about why is literature so important? It's relatable, but think about it. What did Jesus do? Jesus taught in parables. He taught in parables. He told stories. If he just stood there every day and stood on top of a mountain and said, do this, and it just wouldn't have been the same. But he didn't do that. He taught in parables because people, they were like, this is great. We love this. This is relatable. These are
we can see ourselves and be the hero of that story. And I do think people underestimate, especially teenagers. I really do believe that they want to be noble. They're looking and longing for that. But like you said, the world is bombarding them with this idea of just fit in, don't cause waves, don't be that moral or the person that stands out from the crowd. So you're saying this is going to help them make sound judgments, even in the crowd.
When they have to, because it's going to become habit. And that's why it's so important to study that character education isn't, I say it over and over again, it's not teaching facts, it's teaching concepts. So it's making them problem solve. It's helping them come up, like, reading this story. Do you think this person did the right thing? Would you have done something differently? You ask those kinds of questions so that they start thinking about that. Why did they do that? Well, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with the decision they made? Well, let's talk about what's wrong with that decision. And then you're also building the time you're spending talking about these important things, and kids know when it's something important. They know. They can tell just by the way you act. And also a big part of this is kids are imitating. They're reading the stories, they're imitating the people. If you give them heroes to imitate, they will imitate the heroes, which is one of the reasons I wrote the 2 heroes books.
I wanted to touch on that next.
Right. So because the PACE manual stops at 6th grade, and I was being asked over and over again, are you going to do something for older kids? Like, yes, I will at some point. Got to get my kids through high school, and then
right.
And then I finally did it. But if they're going to have, but they're not just imitating what they're reading in the books. They're watching us, and they're watching the way we react to things. So if they're studying, if we're talking about honesty, and then you're running errands with your kids, which we're always doing when we're homeschooling, right? We're always taking them out someplace. And you're someplace. Actually, someone was just talking to me about this today. Someone, my sister, was saying that somebody gave her too much money. And you stop and you say, no, I think you made a mistake, and the children are watching you. In my case, how many times was I out with my kids and we'd be standing in the post office or in the line in the bank, and someone in front of me, their English wasn't quite enough to be able to communicate, and I noticed that they were Spanish speaking, and I would just, excuse me, can I help you? And I would translate for them. And my kids, first couple of times they'd be like, Mom,
stop. What are you doing, Mom?
Why are
Stop
you
talking to the strangers?
Diving in there. And I'd be like, that is a compassionate thing to do for another person. When I lived in Spain and I was fumbling, I liked it when someone came to my rescue, So, little things like that, the way you are with your friends. My kids, and to this day, my friends are like, you're the only person who sends me a birthday card. People don't send birthday cards anymore. To me, that's a big part of being friends with someone, is to
friendship is one of those virtues, and learning how to put that into practice.
Get well cards. My kids see me, thank you notes. My kids knew if they got a present, they'd be like, yay. And I'm like, remember, there's
the thank you card.
There's that stack of thank you cards on your desk on Monday morning after your birthday party. But all those things, they're watching us. So we're able to mimic, and I just think the parents get a lot out of the PACE program too, and reading these stories, because that's why we do these things. And it's so
Yes, well, I
important.
always say homeschooling is part of my own sanctification, purifying me, and we
Oh,
aren't a work that is complete and perfected. We're constantly on
absolutely,
our own journeys. Yes, yes.
absolutely.
Yeah, good. Well, I wanted to, you did mention about the other things that we did touch upon, the discipline and the ages it can be done as a family. But what else have you written? I noticed maybe it was the lockdown or something, but in 2020, you got busy, Monica.
I
So
did.
yeah, tell us about that.
I also had my son trapped in my house with me, and that was a very good thing because he's an editor, and very bright. So he was very helpful. So yes, together he and I wrote two. Yeah, we wrote two. It's true. We were really busy last year. You're right.
Yes.
So one is called Read a Hero, Be a Hero, and that is for it's kind of geared fourth to sixth or seventh grade, and these are all stories, and they're again foundational foundational virtues, the same 10 virtues.
Yes.
And for this, there are 5 short biographies of heroes from present time, from different continents. And so they'll read 5. Again, you don't have to read all 5. You can do whatever you want, but it is in workbook form. And then there are generalized questions, and then there are more specific questions. And then at the end of each chapter, it's kind of bringing them all together. And then there's a person from the community who exemplifies the virtues. So an ambulance driver, I had to put a social worker in there. My daughter's a social worker, I had to put that in. Police officers, whatever. And so it's, again, bringing the practical in. Yes, these people are heroes. So are the firefighters. So are the ambulance.
Right, the people that we interact with every day, that we see in our neighborhood. Absolutely.
So and then that kind of grew into, okay, let's make it a little more for the older kids. And so this Heroes in History, Heroes at Home, recently renamed. So just in case anyone has already bought
okay.
which is called Class.
And that's more for your junior high kids?
Junior high. And it's like it says, a PACE program language arts workbook about heroes. And this is 2 heroes per virtue, same 10 virtues, much more in depth. The vocabulary is a big part of this, because I always liked when my kids were doing a workbook or reading something, and the vocabulary was more and more and more challenging. And then you could fit that in also, like, oh, let's use some words. So very good vocabulary, very challenging exercises, a lot of really, problem solving and having to come up with your own ideas, and writing, and really familiarizing yourself with the new vocabulary. So it does have a lot to prepare the kids for, the standardized tests and writing more, and more elevated. And it is starred, so it has like a 3, 4, and 5-star system, so that maybe the 7th graders would read the stories that have the 3 stars, and then they would build up to it. So yeah, that was a really great.
Well, my goodness. So again, is that something they would do by themselves, or it's something that's more self-paced?
But I guarantee the kids will want to talk to the parents about some of the people they read about, because I tried to use people who weren't common, kind of everyday, really well-known heroes. There were some very different people in there. They're also saints. I could not have saints. I've got Maximilian Kolbe and Saint is one of my faves, and Mother Angelica is in one of these. I think she's going to be a saint, I hope.
So I wanted to, one was, again, I saw some questions come up. So some of them got answered in the time when we were talking, but you and me, Monica, we can go forever with this, which is great. Right. But let's get to some of these questions. I'm going to read them through the chat. I think we already answered, is the program targeted a specific age, K to 6? But somebody specific said, so if we didn't do it at K to 6 and I have a high school, too late to start. So would they jump then into the new books that you wrote with your high schooler? Or
what I would do with a high schooler is I would take the 6th grade section of the manual and read those stories, and the books. I have quite a few books on the list that can definitely be read.
Yes, I agree. I definitely agree.
And because that was a very difficult thing to decide, because you have 7 kids,
correct
the levels. But I had to try to just put in something
Balance it.
for everything, for everybody.
So if they start just and go through the program at the
because you
6th
want-
grade level.
you really want to get the definition in the Bible, you want to give that good foundation, and then they can go to the heroes. But I would go through a year of just doing like the 6th grade.
Okay, so somebody again talked from can you use the program repeatedly as children grow to deepen the virtues over time? And I think you were saying the power of repetition, habit forming.
And that's exactly what I want people to do. I want them to use it year after year.
And then this one I really want to read. This is from Sandra saying, I'm a huge fan of the program. I have a kindergartner son and a 3rd grader niece who I homeschool together. They asked to have virtue time as soon as we are done with morning baskets. They like the stories, the activities in the workbooks, and it's an amazing program that fits perfectly into our Catholic homeschool. Thank you, Monica. So you needed to, yay. It's true. So she talks about morning time, and that is something, I don't know if you're aware, we had Jen McIntosh come and speak to us about morning time, Pam Barnhill, they have programs. It is a great way to do multi-ages and to make the family learn together. And as you were talking, I thought, brilliant, this is exactly it. It's kind of a made to order morning time curriculum. You literally can put your morning time together from your book. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm hearing that from people because morning basket, morning time wasn't big back when I was homeschooling.
Yes, and again, Jen's a homeschool mom, and she came up with it out of, what is it? Necessity is the mother of invention,
Everyone,
just like you.
Doing this morning basket, I'm hearing about it, and they're all telling me, oh, we're doing pace during morning basket, and I'm like, okay. So
yes, and so it's that idea that we gather together as a family in the morning, and we center on certain, usually a read aloud, and usually something that we all together are traveling as a journey. And what better way than character, virtue, and living it and moving together. So how long should we spend focusing on each lesson, and is something in the manual guide you or tell us how to teach each virtue? So I think we kind of covered that, but anything else?
If you want to make it a very specific time period, then I suggest using the workbooks, because that'll dictate, the time. And I think I say in the introduction, it should only take about 15 minutes a day with the workbooks. But the thing is, you just don't know. You don't know if you're reading a story to the kids, they start asking a lot of questions, and then you open up the manual and you find a couple, you have no idea. It might.
Right. And that's such a great point, Monica, because, one of the things is moms, and you say lesson plans and teacher, we underestimate the ability for us to give ourselves permission to go off road. Okay. And that sometimes the most incredible important lessons were when we were off-roading. And it's just because, and again, I even in science lessons or whatever, but better things, you're reading a story about a virtue, and the children now want to hear more of that story or more about that saint. Take the time, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. I would never want them to cut that off, because I remember you're right. It takes such a long time. And especially for, I think, someone who has a background in teaching like I did, it's just these 45-minute increments, like get it done in 40 minutes, because the bell's going to ring and then I was like, wait a minute, I can take more time. This is my
right.
You have autonomy here. I can do.
Well, you said set the pace. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And really, you take it to heart. Pace it with your children's own pace, your family's pace. Yeah, great, good. All right, let's see. We have some more quotes. Again, I'm really enjoying this. Thank you, Monica. This is a blessing. Thank you. Another quote from. I love this program. Use it with my 4.5-year-old. We do a virtue a month and go over it once a week during circle time. So my daughter's been saying, try again all month.
Oh, I love
it. So cute. It's so cute. It's really great. Really great.
I have to tell you some of the best emails I've ever gotten. One was, I think it was 2019. This woman was writing back and forth to me, and she wrote me this email, and I definitely teared up. She said, my sons never wanted to read until we started your program. Now, as the daughter of a reading specialist who, that's all my father talked about. And my father's 93, he's still reading. My father has macular degeneration, has a really hard time reading now. He has a machine that magnifies everything, because the man he's such a reader, he's never going to stop. And so that's what I grew up with. And for this woman to say that my program made readers out of her two sons, oh my gosh, and
Wow.
what
Wow.
an incredible
Right.
reward for me. And another
Yes.
thing I wanted to share,
Yes.
and it's actually on my, I think it's on one page on the website, but people probably don't get to that page. Is it one of the testimonials is about 5 years ago now, one woman wrote to me. She has a prison ministry with her husband, and they're using PACE in their prison ministry. I
Wow.
was blown away when I heard that. I'm like, oh my gosh, PACE is in prison. This is awesome. So what they do is they do a literature-based program, and they took the books that they're using and they fit them in. Obviously weren't on my list because they were for adult men.
Correct.
And they took those books, they figured out which virtue to match it up with, and then used my manual to do the Bible, because it was a religious, ministry. I think they're Protestant. And she said that the conversations, they wanted to memorize the poems
Oh,
in the book
sure.
of Virtues. She said the conversations that came out of it were unbelievable. And then when they would have their families visit, the fathers would say, I want to read your story. And they would read. I know. I was like, I have to say, when I started writing PACE, I never could have possibly dreamed that there'd be a prison someplace in this country that would be using my program.
That's so great. But again, that shows the beauty, Monica, of the beauty of our Lord giving us the wealth of virtues, understanding how foundational it is, how much it is about our growing in ourselves, our closeness to the divine, closeness, in terms of exemplifying Jesus to all we meet on this earth. So that is really a moving story.
And
It's really
to this
great.
day,
So
I'll be in adoration and I'll be reading something and I'll be like, oh, that would be, oh, I can't put it in the book. The book's already, that'd be perfect for PACE. That'd be perfect for PACE. I mean, I'm always seeing things and reading things. Oh, now that would fit in beautifully.
Yes. Well, we could start a little virtue club in our community if you want to ever do that, and people talk, and I'm sure you get all those stories. And I think that's the beauty, you said too, is use it the way that's best fit for your family. And everybody is finding that uniqueness. It has that
Well,
flexibility.
this is
Definitely.
one of the things that's happened recently is just this past year, I started reaching out to a couple of Catholic schools. And just for the heck of it, I decided to reach out to the principal of my grade school in Syracuse, New York, where I spent the first 9 years of my life. And I heard back from this woman, and they're using PACE. And when I told my parents, they were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, so like I went to this school up until 4th grade, and now my program's being used there. I haven't been able to get back to meet her and see it in action because she's been sending me pictures of the posters they've made and
sweet.
And so as soon as I'm allowed to travel, I'm going to Syracuse because I really
wow, Monica. Wow. Well, on that note, I want to thank you so much. What a blessing. I do have another quote from Dee. She says, thank you, Monica. It's something that I've been looking for. It sounds like a great program. I'm looking forward to incorporating it. I want to let everybody know that how can people get in touch with you, Monica?
All right, so the website, I guess I should have had it written somewhere.
It's in the chat, but we will definitely put it on the community with our replay. And it's actually pretty simple, isn't it? CatholicPace.com. So CatholicPace.com.
If you put Monica Speach, and that's EACH, like peach, because a lot of people spell it the other way. If you put Monica Speach and character education, it's going to come up.
Yes, it does. And that's wonderful. Well, good. And people can always reach out to us at, info@CatholicHomeschoolConference.com, or myself, Paola. Reach out to me if you want to find anything more. I'm sure I'll pass on messages to Monica. But again, I want to thank you so much. It's not only been informative, it's been inspiring, encouraging, and I just wanted to thank you again, Monica. I did want to just mention to the community, number one is this is being recorded. We're going to post it on our YouTube channel, which is called Catholic Homeschool. Surprise, that's the name. That's also our Instagram, Catholic Homeschool. And so this way, do share it with friends, family. Monica's mission, her passion has been a blessing to my family, to so many hundreds of families, and I know it will be to your family as well. I wanted to also just have people save the date. May 19th to the 22nd will be the next big Catholic homeschool conference. We're super excited. We've got Kimberly Hahn, Laura Berquist, Sarah McKenzie, Pam Barnhill, all the speakers, Danielle Bean, they're all coming live, as well as we have 40 pre-recorded talks. So that's not something that people are going to want to miss. One of our big categories is character and virtue, because it is that important and that central.
Yeah.
So thank you. On that note, I just, again, so glad I could see you in person. We'll have to meet somewhere physically.
You were the first person to call me and say, hey, I want to sell your program out of my catalog. And that was so exciting for me. I remember getting off the phone with you and calling my family and being so excited.
So great. So great. Good. So happy. Thank you so much. God bless. Thank you, everybody. Have a beautiful day and a beautiful rest of the Lent. God bless.